Hello.
People are joining us. We love it.
Welcome everyone to our June 2025 EdTech Leaders Alliance webinar. Letting folks jump in out of the waiting room there. We have a lot of folks coming in. Hello and welcome to our 2025 June EdTech Leaders Alliance webinar. I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds. Let's finish getting out of the waiting room. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We're happy to see you. I will say, as folks are joining in, I will do the intro, and then you don't have to hear me the whole time, but I would like to encourage you to ask questions, use the chat function, use the Q&A function. Danny and Erica are going to be your speakers today. They are amazing and are so used to working in an online space, so they can keep up with the chat, do their presentation. So please make this as interactive as possible. If you do want to talk, feel free to let us know, and the ladies can unmute you as well. But this is set up in a webinar format, so you're free from screen time today. Feel free to eat your lunch or do all those other little things that you need to do during the day. And with that, we've got folks out of the waiting room. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to our two amazing speakers today. Erica Shumaker, who I have worked with over multiple organizations, is an amazing presenter, brings a lot of energy and pep to everything she does. And Danielle Tymitz, who is just about as geeky as you can get about policy and legislation and advocacy. So I just went to Capitol Hill with her, and I imagine that when I take my grandchild to Disney World for the first time, she may be as excited as Danny was on Capitol Hill. So you're going to get a lot of enthusiasm about this topic. But both of these ladies are very well versed, and they're here to talk to you today about legislation and how you can be an advocate and make a difference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erica and Danny, and peace out on y'all.
Thank you, Stacy. We are very excited to be talking to you today about legislation and education. As Stacy said, Danny is our wonderful expert on all of this. So I care about it a lot, but Danny is really going to be our knowledge source today. So you're going to hear from me a little bit, and then Danny's going to carry us through, and it's going to be wonderful and amazing. Sorry, that's a lot to put on your shoulders there,
High
Danny.
stakes.
But you're going to do so good. So welcome. All right. I haven't presented with Canva and Zoom in a while, so let's see. Okay, you click, you don't hit the arrow. Wonderful. All right, so today we have some things that we are going to share. So we're going to talk about why staying informed on legislation matters. We're going to look at some specific examples, both from Ohio and on a national level, of how bills become laws. We're going to look specifically at education-related bills and how that process works. One of them is a bill that has already passed and is in effect, and you are all very familiar with. Another one is one that is currently in process, and then we'll look at a federal one that's in process as well. We're going to follow the action. We're going to see what's happening, how we can engage in things. And then if we want to make our voices heard with our legislatures, we're going to share some ways to do that, hopefully even integrate some ed tech into that process. And then also some tips for first-time advocates. We know that reaching out to legislatures is not comfortable. It's not something anyone is like really geeked out to do all the time for the first time. We're not like, I gotta go call this person. But once you do it, maybe it gets to that point. So we're going to share some tips to help kind of break down those barriers, and then take questions. And you're welcome to ask questions throughout as they come up too, and we will address them in real time. So I'm Erica, as Stacy introduced. I work with the EdTech Leaders Alliance on our advocacy branch. I am our co-chair along with Carly Gantos, who's here. Hi, Carly. And Sean, who I think is here in case you're here. Hi, Sean. And if you're watching the recording, there you go. So I get to do these webinars and talk about policy and advocacy and things too. And now or turn it over to Danny.
Hi, I'm Danny Tymitz. I think my Zoom name says Danielle. I go by both. So I'm just really excited to be here. I am the ISTE co-chair for ETLA. I've been doing this work with Learn 21 and ETLA for over a decade. I am also a current and former school board candidate. So I've been really civically engaged over the last probably about 15 or 10 to 12 years. And eventually that led me into candidacy. So a lot of the expertise that I've gained around policy is just through listening and paying attention to how legislature works. So I hope to share some of that information along with some of my ed tech expertise on this webinar. So why does it matter? Why are we even here? I'm sure, as you all know, we're in times that are a little dicey, where things change on a dime, and we're wondering what to do and how to handle it. Staying informed matters so much because it allows you to anticipate change. So if you have a base for what's going on, and a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, specifically around how the legislature works, how to engage with our legislators, those things help you to be able to anticipate what's coming, because you get an idea for how the people that are making these laws interact with the public, how they respond to votes, and how you can advocate for the things that really matter to you and the students you serve. Being able to be proactive, being able to be forward thinking, seeing the trends that you're noticing in education, and being able to kind of predict how that's going to force policy. A really good example of this is cell phones. So the conversation around cell phones have changed so much over the last 10 years because before pre-COVID, we didn't have devices in everyone's hands. School districts were doing all kinds of things with cell phones. They were having kids bring them because they wanted them to use them as a device for educational purposes. So we've kind of swung the pendulum now that students have devices in their classroom. And in Ohio, we have a law that went into effect that will start starting this next school year, where every school district now has to have some cell phone policy. It doesn't say they have to ban it, though that is being pushed at our legislature by our governor, but they do have to have some policy. We saw that coming as educators. We saw the change in how students were using cell phones, and being able to be proactive with those thoughts and talk to our legislatures and be those experts in the room gives them some background knowledge when they're building these bills and creating these laws. The last piece is something that I know is so near and dear to all of our educators' hearts, and that's protecting our students. It's why we do what we do. We want to do things that are good for kids. So being able to look at a legislative proposal, break it down, and look at those unintended consequences, because these are technically not being written, these aren't always being written by educators. These are being written by lawyers and legislators. That doesn't mean they know what it's like to sit in your classroom. So being able to read it and dissect it a little bit and look at what those consequences are going to be allows you then to advocate for things that will help, will fix, and then get that information to your legislators so that they can amend it before it becomes a law. Because who better to explain how a bill is going to affect the classroom than somebody that's actually in a classroom? All right. So I'm not going to get too deep into a government lesson here, but I think it's important to understand the legislative process. I did it through pictures because that's how my brain worked this morning. The red and blue means nothing other than it matches our slide template. So don't read any politics into it. It is just red and blue to differentiate. What you'll see is, so when a bill starts, basically you're starting up, there are so we have a session start. Our session started in January in Ohio. We run on a biennial session, so we're 2 years long. Our session started in January, and our legislators started writing bills. And those bills each get their own number. That's when you hear HB1, SB2, you know, those numbers are like their user ID. The House and the Senate both have legislators in it, and those people will write the bills. When those bills get introduced, they then decide if it's going to be brought to committee. So you see those different heads. If the bill was introduced in the Senate, it will be brought down to a Senate committee. If it gets introduced at the House, it will be brought down to a House committee. The work of the committee is really important. So when you see that a bill is in committee, This means the things that are happening at the legislative level, the senators and representatives are researching it. They are seeking expertise from the community, from people that are practicing in these fields. So in education, they are looking for feedback to understand how these potential bills could impact education. They're also gatekeeping. So if they see a bill that's just real terrible, just on its face, this is never going to work, the committee is the one that shuts that down. It's also their opportunity to amend it. So if they see a bill and they say, you know what, I actually talked to a bunch of tech directors and they said there's no way it's going to work the way that this is outlined. Let's amend it. They propose amendments, and this is where they refine that bill. Once they've refined that bill and they feel good about it, they'll bring it to an entire vote at the Senate or the House level, depending on which side of the House you get. And if it passes on their side, it switches. So if it passes on the House, it switches over to the Senate. The Senate does the whole same thing again. They go to committee, then they vote again. Once it is passed on both sides, it gets the green check of approval, and it goes to the governor's desk. Certainly the governor will have some information on this bill prior to getting it, but this is where the governor gets the choice of veto or to sign it into law. In Ohio, a lot of times once it gets to the governor's desk, it will be signed into law because our legislature is a Republican legislature and we have a Republican government. That's just how that one runs down. All right.
Danny, can I add one you did a wonderful job. If it changes between the House and the Senate, so like let's say you have a bill and it changes, like if it's voted in the House and approved and then it gets to the Senate and the Senate makes those changes, it then has to go back to the House, right, to be approved.
So those changes have to be approved because they can't just take a whole brand new version and say, you know what, thank you so much, hand it over, fix everything, make all those changes, and then just pass it directly to the governor. That's a great catch. Thank you.
Yeah, and so that's another place to make your voice heard too. If like you're following along and there's a bill that you were like, I didn't love it when it passed the House, I didn't know about it, or the Senate, whatever the first one was, I didn't know about it. Then I made my voice heard in the Senate. I can continue the process in both branches and how that works.
Right. The other thing you'll notice too, and I'll bring it up because I want to talk here about SB 9. No, that's fine. You can do it on SB 9. SB 9, when you look, we talked about the user ID for a bill, SB 9, SB and HB, as you may know, just designates where it started. Did it start in the Senate or did it start in the House? So we all went through the change when SB 9 was introduced to change kind of how school districts are working through student data privacy. This is a huge deal in Ohio. And I'm going to actually switch the screen share if I could, Erica, and show my screen because I want to use SB 29 to demonstrate what this, oops, sorry, here we go. Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen? Are you seeing the legislature now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So the link that's on our slides will take you straight to our legislation page, and you can kind of see this is what any bill will look like. It outlines that process I just talked about, where it is introduced in the Senate or introduced in the House, and then how you can follow and track the progress of that bill. SB 29 went through both houses, of course. They were passed by both. They ended up signed by the government, and then it went into effect in October. All of a sudden, once it was in effect, they realized that the verbiage of that bill was not exactly it wasn't working the way they anticipated for it to work in school districts. As you guys probably recognize, there were some tweaks that needed to be made. What's interesting is we were sitting through webinar after webinar after trying to track this bill right after it went into effect. And what we found to be true is they made changes right away. They amended this bill really quickly, but they amended it not in this bill because this bill had already been passed. They amended it in an entirely different bill. So sometimes you have to pay attention not just to the initial bill because this bill's here, but also the amended bill, which was a bill about career technical education. They just added an amendment onto a career technical education bill that then amended how they manage the student data privacy issues in Ohio. So something to kind of keep aware of. That sometimes those amendments might not come straight through that bill. We're watching a bill currently right now. As you may know, this is the biennium budget bill. And the biennium budget is basically the appropriations at the state level for the next 2 years for Ohio. And you can see the difference in the process for the biennium budget versus the Senate Bill 29 that we just looked at. In the biennium budget, you can see right now it's just been introduced in the Senate. The Senate actually just released their version of the budget bill, which changes a little bit. Specifically, I've been watching, obviously, the school funding pieces of this and watching how the budget changes happen at the Senate versus the House. And the House version did things like putting a cap on the reserves you probably heard about. And the Senate version keeps that cap, but it changes the number a little bit. So keeping an eye on how those numbers work and then talking to your school and district treasurer will be the person that would be the one that will know how to kind of disaggregate all that data, because it does get really complicated when you start looking at the different formulas. But I just wanted to show the difference in these two budgets, or in these two bills, in what that looks like as you're tracking it. If you are somebody that wants to learn more, any bill that's in the House, the committees, or the Senate, you can find it on the legislature page, and I will share that information later. But every bill has a tracking mechanism, so you can actually sign up and get updates. So when when something changes, if it passes a different step in the process, you have the option to get an email. It'll send it to you, and you would know it's moved along in the process. All right, stop that shit.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now we have musical screen shares happening.
Sorry,
today.
I know. I should have.
I like it. No, it's fun. It's keeping me on my toes, keeping everyone fresh. All right. Can you see this? The
Yes.
Congress.gov. Okay. So Danny shared some very local to Ohio bills and how they work and what they look like. And this process is the same federally as what she described locally or at the state level. So we thought it'd be helpful to look at a bill that is going through our federal legislation. So we're looking at SJ Resolution 7. You might have received some emails from UTLA or seen some posts on our LinkedIn page about reaching out to your congresspeople about this specific resolution that they are trying to pass. So very similar to Ohio, this shows you, so when you Google a resolution, it takes you to congress.gov. You can see where it is at in the process. So this resolution is related to E-rate funding, specifically for hotspots for students to access internet when they are not at school. And so you can see here who sponsors it. You can see the committee that talked about it. Danny was talking about it goes to committees to be written and reviewed. You can see where it's at in the process, and you can see that it was introduced and it did pass the Senate, and now it's at the House, and where that is at. You can read the bill. You can look at actions that have been taken on the bill. So we can see kind of when it was introduced, the process of the committees, the vote that happened in the Senate, and where it's at right now. In May, it was sent to the House. It reached the House and it is held at the desk. Danny, do you know, my take is that the Speaker of the House just isn't bringing it to the floor yet to vote on it. Is that what that?
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
That's whose desk.
Perfect. So if this is something that interests you in terms of reaching out to your representatives, if you're like, no, I think my students should have these hotspots to take home to be able to access their curriculum and their things if they don't have internet at home, or if they live in a really rural area, or if you're like, no, I support the legislation as it is, and you want to reach out to your representative about that, you know where it's at. So you know there's still a vote to be had, and that you know who to speak to about that. So what I would do is I'd reach out to my local representative. And if I didn't know who that was, I would Google it. We're going to share some things on how to find that information. But I wanted to share, bringing in some ed tech into this. I went to ChatGPT last night to ask it about the situation and help me understand more about the bill and to help me understand who I could speak to about the bill. So I have my thing here. You won't see it answer in real time, but you'll see what it said to me and just pretend like it's working in real time. So I said, can you help me understand? And I gave it the link to the bill. I'd also like to know who I should contact on the federal level to voice my opposition to the bill. I live, and I gave them, I'm not in Ohio, I'm in Arizona. So I said, I'm in Clarkdale, Arizona. Can you provide my representative and Congress people? It was kind of a lot ask ChatGPT to do for me, but it did it. It took 8 seconds, but it did it. So then it broke down for me what Senate Joint Resolution 7 is about when it was introduced, talking about the FCC rule that was introduced in 2024. I looked all this up. It is accurate. I don't think you should totally trust ChatGPT every time it gives you information. Like, doubt it, look it up, make sure it's there. But at least it gave me the information to know where to look to look things up. It tells me what is being in question and why. It tells me the current status, like we looked at on the thing. It's passed the Senate, now it's in the House. And what it means. If the House passes, it's signed by the president, and FCC rule enabling offsite hotspot use will be repealed, limiting broadband support on the premise. And you have to essentially use it like in a library or a school only. So if I wanted to voice my opposition, if I wanted people to be able to take their hotspots home to do their work, here are the people I could contact in Arizona. So it gives me, my senators are Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego. It tells me their phone numbers in both Washington and they both have Phoenix ones, I think. Or it tells me I can contact them online. And then it tells me who my representative is and which district I'm in, because I always forget the number of my district. It doesn't make sense. So I could contact him as well. And then I liked this. I didn't even ask it for this, but it was like tips for contacting. These are things you're going to see on our PowerPoint. Keep it concise and factual. They don't need to know my life story. They don't need to know everything about it. They need to know my expertise, my background, and why I feel the way I do. Explain why, and then use multiple channels. So you can call both offices if you want to. You can email, you can write a letter. You are not constrained to just voicing your voice once, essentially. And then it gave me a summary of contact. Again, I didn't even ask for this. I was so impressed with ChatGPT last night. And then next steps if I wanted to take them on how to handle this situation. And then I made it a more pointed search. So I said, I'm an educator, and I think this bill might harm students. Will you please help me draft a phone script where I can call my representative and an email script that I could send to them? So I gave it both those things. And it gave me a phone script that isn't half bad. I might edit it for myself and make it more reliable or more my own voice. But it gave me, hi, my name is Erica. I'm a constituent from Clarkdale, Arizona. So I'm letting them know where I'm from. I'm also an educator. In one sentence, I've covered 3 very important things. I'm calling to express my strong opposition to SJ Resolution 7. Overturn that. I might even not say that on the phone, because I just might say I oppose the resolution. And then I would say why. As an educator, it's important. I urge you to oppose this resolution. And then again, the email template is very similar. I could edit it. I could take out the M dashes if I don't want people to think it's AI written. And I could send that off to the people I want to send it to. So this whole thing where I got a lot of information, I checked my information that it was accurate. It gave me scripts that I could use. Took me less than 10 minutes last night of a quick ChatGPT and Google search to make sure ChatGPT was correct in the things that they gave me to do. So I share all that just as a real live example of how these things can be used, how we can use some ed tech that's around us for good. And I also wanted to share too. So some
Hey,
of the
Erica,
things
real
that,
quick before
yeah,
you jump off that top, we've got a great question in the chat from Kathy Parker Jones. Would you be okay with sharing your transcript? Like, go up to the top right corner on your chat GPT and click
yeah,
that share button, and that'll create a link to it that you
sure.
can just put in the
chat here.
I'd be
Yeah.
happy to.
Yeah, that's really
Oops.
cool. It might not
Yeah,
work. ChatGPT is doing funny things today.
It is. Let me work on it here.
Can we add
It's
it to the
giving me-
slides and share the slides out?
Here we go. I got it. But yes, we can do that too.
Thanks, Erica.
Of course. Thank you. And just so you know, there's a chat that failed at the bottom because as Danny said, things are not going as well for ChatGPT. And there's more. I forgot I even did this. So I made it even like if I just wanted to know who's pro, who's con for this resolution, I asked it, just break it down for me. Tell me like some pros and cons to this. And so it gives me the pros, who's introduced it, why they've introduced it, and the cons, who's opposed to it, and why they're opposed to it as well. So you can make ChatGPT do a lot of stuff for you. And then it gave me a summary comparison even. So I don't know why it was so great for me last night, but I really appreciated just how much you could use it. Use it for to learn more about. And then you can give it, like I learned this from Carly. She does a lot of great stuff with AI for educators, like giving it a role. Like I'm an educator, you're an educator, and telling it what the role is that you're trying to get the information for. And that really helps kind of hone in on the output that you get from AI and what it gives you. So yeah, feel free to use it. Great. And then go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, it got me thinking about ways that I've used AI for this kind of a similar purpose. A lot of times you'll find companies or organizations that will write a letter that you just have to click and send, but it doesn't include my expertise. So a lot of times I will take nuggets from that and ask ChatGPT to rewrite it with my expertise. Rewrite this, use the fact that I've been an educator for 20 some years, use the fact that I'm an educational technologist to give it a little bit more personalization. So lots of great opportunity to do that without having to be fully creative when you want to contact your legislators.
That's perfect. Or like you might feel tapped out too, right? Like it's a lot to keep track of with everything and a lot to sort through on top of work. Like what we're saying to do is not an easy thing to do. So like use the tools to use some of that mental load for you too. And then it's funny that you said like the written letters too. So that's a great transition. So one of the resources we we wanted to share is COSIN has an advocacy and policy page, which keeps track. So again, using some of that mental load for people who are working very hard, keeps track of the education legislation and kind of gives you how they feel as COSIN and why those things matter as COSIN. So take it if you would like to, or read about it and use it the way you would like to use it. But they have like this is the SJ resolution 7. We're going to look at that in just a second. But there are so many other things that they're talking about too on here. So there's cybersecurity, advocates rally at the Supreme Court to hear oral arguments. You can learn about what's happening with education and legislation from a really trusted site and partner in these things. And one of the things I like that you could kind of take these two strategies together actually is that when there is legislation that we need to contact our representatives about, COSIN does a really great job of if you click on it, making it very easy to contact your representatives. So on the E-rate, if you're interested in emailing your representative, but you're like, I don't know who they are, I don't want to do that research right now. If you click on that, it takes you to this letter that you can send to them to voice that you oppose it, and you just enter your name. I'm not going to enter my email because it's a webinar that's recorded and I don't know that the internet needs that information. But if you're somewhere not being recorded that's going to live on the internet, give them your address, your email address, and it'll pull up a script for you that's editable. So I would run that maybe through ChatGPT and say, change this with these specific things in mind about me. And then you just click send and it sends it directly to all of your representatives. So I've done this with COSIN. It sent it to all 3 that it showed you in ChatGPT, to Mark Kelly, to Ruben Gallego, to Eli Crane. I sent it all to, I didn't have to go to their separate ones. It sent it to all 3 in one fell swoop. So that's a really wonderful resource if you're kind of tracking things and curious about COSIN and where they're standing on legislation and ways that you can make your voice heard. They've made it a really wonderful experience to do that, I think.
So easy.
Okay. I think we're back to the PowerPoint now. Okay. Oh, I kind of already went over these things. As I was showing you my chat GPT, you can call or you can email your representatives, both work. I will say keeping it simple is really going to be key. While you're on the phone with them, those are other people that could be calling too. So in a lot of ways, it's a volume game. So the more calls that people are in office, the more likely they are to respond to it. Sorry, my earbud just fell out of my ear. And I can tell you the keep it simple is really important. I actually interned for a federal congressman when I was in college. And it was my job when I went there every Friday to answer the phones of constituents who called and then record what they were calling about. So you're not going to reach your congressperson by calling. You are probably talking to a college intern. And I cannot tell you the number of people who called because their neighbor's dog was barking too loud. That is 90% of the phone calls I got in the early 2000s of interning for a congressperson. It may be different now, but I do know when someone called with something substantive and it was clear and it was to the point, I could give that directly to my boss who gave it directly to our congressman. So being clear, being as articulate as you can be and keeping it simple. Here's how I feel about this legislation. Here's why. Thank you so much. Will actually help guarantee that they get that information and are able to do something with it. If your neighbor's dog is barking, that's probably a police issue in case you're like, oh, my neighbor's dog does bark a lot. Can I call my representative? Probably not. But just know that those are the kinds of things that they get day in, day out. So I also, when I call, just try and be as nice as I can be, as pleasant as I can be. Just say, hi, thank you so much. Here's my information. Don't give them a reason not to take what you're saying seriously. I am less familiar. They don't do this in my state. Danny, would you mind kind of sharing a little bit more about the writing a testimony piece?
So writing testimony happens in that committee phase. So when they're looking for expertise, that's the time when you can go and you can either write and submit testimony. There's a template on the legislature. I don't have it pulled up. I wish I did. There is a template out there for you to submit testimony, and it follows the keep it simple rules. They're not looking for they're not looking for legalese. They're looking for your experience. So in that case, that is you explaining why you're an expert on this, why you think these things, and whether you oppose, support, or are just an interested party in a specific piece of legislation. And there's a couple different things you can do. You can write it and submit it in writing. They will get that testimony. Or you can actually go to Columbus in Ohio and present your testimony live on the floor during their committee meetings.
Thank you. I threw that to her because my brain totally just.
Well,
so thank you, Danny, for taking that.
Yeah, I was thinking too. I've started to submit testimony. I haven't actually done it yet, but I was going to do it the other couple weeks ago around something, and ChatGPT, at least giving it the template and throwing in those main bullet points, it's a great starting place for written testimony specifically. I wouldn't use it necessarily for a full script for a live presented testimony, of course, because it's not going to sound just like you, but it's a great starting place for both if you want to get those points in to make sure that your legislators understand exactly what impact a bill that they're considering will have.
Perfect. All right, it's your turn.
So you want to be an advocate. I know there are people on here that probably have already done all these things and have called their senators and their representatives. But for those folks that may be just kind of toe in the water, not sure what to do, but want to do something, here's just 3 quick tips. First, do your research. Make sure you have an idea of what you're calling about. You do not have to read all 4,000 pages of HB 96 to call and ask for fair school funding. You just have to have a good feel for what's happening in the legislature following that process. And you need to understand enough about it to be able to speak passionately about why you think it is a good idea or is not a good idea. So just having those kind of basics of each of the bill you're calling about is going to be really important. The second piece, of course, is be authentic. It is really important for you to show why you care about this. And it might just be a simple sentence like Erica suggested, which is, I'm an educator. I've been teaching for X number of years. I care about my students. Sharing those details gives you some street cred when you're having these conversations with the interns at the legislature. And start small. If you feel nervous about calling, just keep it short. Do a really short call. And honestly, if you feel so nervous about calling, you can't bring yourself to pick up the phone, email. They're still tracking those contacts. So if you don't feel comfortable making that phone call, maybe your first small step is to write an email and send it out. I will tell you, it is satisfying when I get the automatic reply from my legislator when I've sent an email that says, "Hey, Danny, thanks for caring." It is even more satisfying when I get a response a couple days later, because I know it wasn't like it didn't get auto sent. Like somebody read my email and responded to me. One thing that I found to be really kind of helpful was the person that responded. I wrote an email to my legislator, my local rep, and I got a response from one of his interns. And I responded to that email because now I had a person on the line and I asked him follow-up questions. I had asked about fair school funding. He responded with some details about what the representative's thoughts were. And I just took that email and I responded back. I'm like, cool, can you give me a link to the amendment he proposed? And I got that amendment within 24 hours because now I had a conversation going with a live person. So I feel like that's like a small pro tip is if you get somebody to respond, just keep talking to that person. So anyway, so start small. I do think the next is a sample script for you. Is that the next slide? I did pull up a sample script. I know Erica's shared how you can use ChatGPT. If ChatGPT happens to be down, here's a sample script and an easy way for you to make that first phone call if you do want to do that. Once you've figured out the phone numbers for your rep or your senator, just my name is fill in the blank. I'm calling from here. Zip code is usually really important because they want to know that you're a constituent. Specifically in the House and Senate of Ohio, we do have specific senators and representatives for the state. So they want to know that you're a constituent of their district. I'm calling about this bill number. Remember, use that user ID for it, HB1 or HB2. And this is my job title. This is why I care about it. Because we're educators, I figured we would put, as a educational tech leader with over 20 years of experience, I want to share my support for this proposed bill. Thanks for your time. And a lot of times, like Erica said, you're talking to an intern a college intern that's really just tallying the number of support and opposition calls they get. So they get a feel for what the constituency really wants around each bill. So these calls may seem short and succinct and unnecessary on your end, but they do build up and they become part of that count for the senator or the representative as they're making their decisions. All right. This is everyone's favorite page. This is where we give you all the resources. Erica, do you mind, are you able to click on some of those just so I can show them?
Yeah, which one?
Click on, well, we did COSIN advocacy. It's still up there. Go ahead and click on honesty for me, please. Thank you.
Great. You're seeing it?
This is fine. Okay. I just want to show the page real quick. This is Honesty for Ohio Education. It is a nonpartisan group that tracks legislation. So they have a newsletter that comes out every Thursday and just gives you a rundown of things that are happening. If you scroll up just a hair, that track legislation link will give you a legislation tracker. They do on their page track their, scroll down. Sorry, I should have just shared my screen because I know where all this stuff is. If you go to right there. So it's broken up by House bill or Senate bill. They do share opposition and support on this page from a public education standpoint. So keep that in mind. But it also does give you a really good rundown of all the tracking of where things are in the process, in the legislative process, as well as what things are being kind of considered, moving through, are they in committee, et cetera, et cetera. So I use this page a lot instead of going to our Ohio legislature because it's more concise. But Honesty for Ohio Education has a bunch of great resources around public education and specifically legislation that impacts education. So I use that page quite often. The next one that I put up there, these are similar. The Find Ohio Representatives and Find Your Senator. I don't think it's necessary to go to both of them. If you would just click on one of them. Thank you, Erica.
Oh, so welcome.
On the Ohio House page, you can scroll down to the bottom. There's your right there. On the left, it's basically asks who represents me. You can find your senator this way or your representative. And basically you're just putting in, you can put in your address and it will pull up your representative with all their information, contact, phone number, email, however you want to get in touch with those folks. So it'll pull up a page that looks like this. It shows the district, shows what things they've done recently, which is kind of nice. It'll usually include bills that they've sponsored or co-sponsored too. And the last resource is just the Ohio legislature as a whole. If you don't feel like you want to use the Honesty for Ohio Education, or you really just want to go dig into the full process, this is the site I was showing when I showed Senate Bill 29 and HB 96 earlier. This is where you can find every bill that's in the legislature currently, and you can actually backdate to other legislature or other legislative sessions from previous years. So if you want to go see an old bill, you can check that out too. But I usually, a lot of times our districts will put out a number. So they'll say we're watching HB 9 or HB 10, and I'll just throw that number into the search bar there and it will take me to, go ahead and do 96. Yeah, that's fine. Because we know 96 exists. And there's your bill. Yeah, that's it. The appropriations. Okay. And that'll take you right to the bill where you can then kind of check out all the details of it, read the full text if you have 4,000 pages of legalese on your agenda for the day. But plenty of opportunity to kind of dig deep into this stuff. So we thought it was important to kind of see those resources and share those resources because there's a lot out there, and sometimes it's a lot to wrap your brain around if you're just kind of getting started with this with this advocacy piece.
Yeah, and Stacy sent us a message too. She left, but she's like, make sure to mention 5calls.org. So as we talked about the voicing what you're doing, 5calls.org can be another great resource. It takes 5 minutes a day is what they say. They can tell you who to contact over different things as well.
Yeah, and it gives you scripts. So
yes,
that work is done for you. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this feels like a good place to, to quickly insert that.
Probably should add that to the slides.
Yeah, we'll add it as a resource.
Let it before we send them out, yeah.
Yeah, so we just talked at you a lot, hopefully, definitely in helpful ways, informative ways, in fun ways, as talking about legislation is so fun. But we wanted to know, we got a question earlier, which was wonderful, but is there any other questions that we could address today as we're kind of wrapping up? And as you're thinking of your question and typing it, we do just want to say thank you so much for coming, for your interest in this, in legislation and education and policy, and how it makes a difference for educators and, as Danny said earlier, most importantly for our students too. Hopefully I stalled enough if you were writing a question.
Gotcha. I'm not seeing.
Okay, I can stall more. Yeah, I can stall more in case there's like a question at the tip of someone's tongue. As we're wrapping up, so just know you can still ask questions as I'm talking. I'll just go to the thank you slide so there's less pressure on you. If you liked this webinar, we will send the recording of it out in the Vibe, our newsletter next week. You're welcome to forward that to people in your district. If you're like, I loved this, I'd love for other people in my district to watch this, you're welcome to share that out when you get the recording link next week in the Vibe. I put in the chat our website at techleadersalliance.org. There you'll be able to keep track of all the webinars coming at you. We're not quitting this summer. So you can join our other webinars coming up. I know we have Diary of a CTO with Bill Fritz next week. We have one of our corporate council members, Vincent, John LaPlante at Vincent, is doing a webinar on how to survive a cyber attack. He's going to simulate one in real time, so that'll be a great one to come to. And then at the end of July, we have a really great one on parent engagement using ed tech tools. So it's a great time to kind of start thinking about that too, as the school year will be right around the corner at that point. I'm so sorry. I know summer just started for most of you, and how dare I mention next year.
I choose
but Enjoy your summer. Take your vacation. Don't think about school right now. But those are some great opportunities coming up. There's also a link to our podcast there, The Beat, which is hosted by Sean Whalen. So really great resources available for y'all there. And no questions came in during my stall tactics, which is totally okay.
Thank you
So
guys for coming. I appreciate you being here and listening to us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And feel free to reach out. Both of us, you can reach both of us at our name at learn21.org or at techleadersalliance.org, but that's long. So just do Erica at Learn21 or Danni at Learn21, and we're happy to share any resources we have with you. Oh, thank you, Danni. All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you get some fun summertime.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.